It is great to welcome everybody to the first ever Siblings 2 Day event. And we're starting in your part of the world, Gloria. We're starting in the Australasia region. You're down in New Zealand. So welcome everybody to the Siblings 2 Day event, whatever parent needs to know about sibling sexual abuse. I'm Nancy Morris. I'm the creator and founder of the Siblings 2 Day and the Siblings2 hashtag. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Gloria Masters, who in a moment will give us a little introduction of who she is, where she is, what she does, and all the rest of it. But I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for joining us today. This is the first of 3 events today. It is across the globe. I'm in Eastern Canada right now. It's 10 o'clock on Friday night. And I know down in New Zealand, it is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I also know that although this particular event is set to be for parents, I also know that others will be on the call as well. There'll be adult survivors, there'll be other family members, there's professionals and practitioners who will be joining us in all 3 calls, basically. So I welcome you all, and I hope that during the course of this next 30 or 40 minutes, we'll be able to answer some of your questions and give you some guidance as to the breadth of the video library that we have created for you and the resources pack that I hope you've received because it just went out in email a few minutes ago. So if you don't have that in front of you now, that's fine. You don't need it. What we want to do on this call is run you through what the video library contains, just generally speaking, and look at some of those resources and then answer any questions that you have. So before we dive into all of that, Gloria, I'm passing it over to you. Please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Nancy, and what a pleasure to be here. It's very exciting. The very first Sibling2 Day.
Very first one.
Very first. So look, I'm in not sunny New Zealand, as Nancy said, but my name's Gloria Masters. I am a survivor of sibling sexual abuse, among other forms of abuse. I'm also a mother of adult children now. I'm an ex-teacher, I'm an ex-psychotherapist, and I guess I'm very grateful to have been able to set up a foundation here in New Zealand. It's a charity called Handing the Shame Back, and I also run a YouTube channel by the same name, interviewing other survivors and offering resources and support globally. So that's a little synopsis about me, and lovely to be here alongside Nancy.
Oh, it's great to have you. I'm glad we were able to get it worked out that you can be on the call with us today, Gloria. What I want to do for everyone who is live on the call, because you're here live, you have an opportunity to ask questions and to chat. We're not going to bring you up on the video or anything like that, and you can ask questions anonymously. So there's a Q&A button that is either across the bottom of the screen or underneath the 3 dots that are in most Zoom meetings. You'll see both chat and Q&A there. You can bring those up. If you have a question, that's absolutely fine. Feel free to ask the question. I am not very good at sort of double tasking or multitasking with those things, but we'll keep an eye on that. I do ask that you hold off on some of the questions until a little bit later, because Gloria and I might actually answer your question before we even know you've asked it, if you ask it too early, but certainly open to any questions you have, or if you want to chat. So that's absolutely fine. And as I said, it's across the bottom, probably the bottom of your screen in your Zoom control bar. The agenda for our time together is, in a moment, Gloria and I are going to walk through the videos and the conversations that have been had in recent weeks that have all been pre-recorded, so that you get access to those starting right now via the links in the resources pack, the different conversations that we've been having, and with professionals and academics and lived experience experts about different aspects and themes within sibling sexual abuse. We're going to walk through that library. And also, if you happen to see my email earlier, you would have seen that while I was preparing this event, certain conversations sort of came available. There were opportunities for other conversations. So while they weren't in the original agenda, there's 3 additional videos and 1 podcast episode that, because of the content, fit really well into this event. So they've been included as well, plus a lot of resources in the resources pack. And we're gonna cover those things. There's going to be a opportunity to share a few of the snippets. So we're going to insert a couple of quick videos so that you can see different things that are included and from the videos that are made available to you. And then we'll open it up for answering any questions you have. Of course, we can't really answer any super personal questions or anything like that, but if you're looking for information on particular subject matter within sibling sexual abuse or child sexual abuse, perhaps I can redirect you to one of the videos or one of the resources that's being made available. So, Gloria, you ready to dive in?
Yes, go for it.
So why are we having this event? Well, very briefly, because it's in the introductory video that I shoot for the whole event, video number 1, we know that sibling sexual abuse, in the research, we know that it is likely to be 3 times more common than parent-to-child abuse. It is likely affecting, on a conservative level, 10% of the group of children between the ages of 5 and 18 in most urban communities around the world, by either the person who caused harm or the person who was harmed. 10% of that group of children is being impacted by sibling sexual abuse. And we also know that the impacts of sibling sexual abuse are as significant, and in some instances, and some would say are more significant than other forms of child sexual abuse or child abuse generally, because of the important relationship between the siblings and what happens when that relationship is essentially destroyed or severely impacted, and how those impacts are very different. So we know all of these things. We being myself, I'm an adult survivor. And like Gloria, I also have a professional background in psychology, and I'm also a parent. So sort of throw all those things into the mix. And so we, is the proverbial people who study this stuff, or for one reason or another are very interested in sibling sexual abuse and the facts around it. We know these things to be true. We know these things in terms of statistics and impacts. We also know, for example, that sibling sexual abuse knows no race, gender, socioeconomic class, religion, region, culture, or country. You will find sibling sexual abuse pretty much everywhere. And because of the international and global nature of this event, that's evidenced throughout all the videos. We have a global group of professionals, academics, and lived experience advisors, and they all share the same type of information. So we know it's global. We know all of this to be true, yet we also know that parents in particular, or society generally, but parents in particular, don't have this information or don't want the information, don't want to pay attention to the information, or for other reasons are not willing to look at sibling sexual abuse as being one of the worst types or the worst type of intrafamilial abuse. We just sort of we don't want to pay attention to it. We don't want to talk about it. One of the reasons why this event came to be is because I firmly believe that in order for the things to happen that we want to have happen in terms of perhaps maybe changes in legislation or the addition of sibling sexual abuse in conversations in sex ed class in schools, or these sorts of things, I firmly believe that those things will not happen until society normalizes the conversation. There will be no political will, there'll be no, any kind of will, parental will, societal will, political will, to change anything unless people say, hey, no, I've had enough of this, we need to do something. We've seen it in other forms as well. 20 years ago, we weren't talking about sexual abuse that much in the church. We certainly weren't talking about it in sports teams. There was no such thing as the Me Too movement. Well, it was there, but nobody knew about it. So, if we're not talking about it, it goes on unabated and it remains hidden in shadows. If the statistics about the children are true, even conservatively at 10%, and that's conservative, they're more than that, you can bet a couple of things. You can bet There are millions upon millions of adult survivors who are not thriving. And there are also millions and millions of adults who caused harm, who, because of the type of abuse that sibling sexual abuse is, are also not thriving in their life. I think it's time for society to go, hey, we need to do something about this. So let's start by talking about it. So that's what the event is all about. So Gloria, we're going to talk about it now.
Perfect. I like what you are saying. The fact that, yes, you're conservatively estimating 10%, and the numbers seem to reflect that. But equally, we know that globally there are up to 1 in 3 adults walking around who have experienced some form of child sexual abuse. Now, if sibling sexual abuse is 3 times more likely to have occurred sibling to sibling than parent to child, Houston, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
And I think we have got to stop hiding this and sugarcoating this. The fact is, it's out there. We've got devastated adolescents and children as we speak experiencing this, who don't quite know what to do with it. And equally, we've got parents out there who just don't know what to do with it. So my key objective for this, alongside you, Nancy, is let's start sharing this information so that people get a free pass in terms of being able to accept it's happening. You are not alone in this. And as a parent, we're here to help you.
Absolutely. And this is a really good time. I wasn't going to do this just yet, but I will. In one of the videos, I had an extra conversation with Claire Blur, who is the CEO of SARSAS, which is the Somerset and Avon. Oh, I'm going to mess it up, so I'm not going to say it. But it's a rape crisis center in Somerset and Avon in the south of England. And they were instrumental in putting together a research project that culminated in a conference in February 2022, which was so well attended that they had to close the doors on the Zoom room at, I think it was like 700 or 800 people. There was that many people who were interested in finding out what the results were. So I have a little snippet of the conversation I had with her, and I want to share that with you guys now. And I'm not very good at this, so I'll just do it real quick and hope that I grab the right one. Otherwise, we'll be listening to somebody else. So this is just a very brief snippet of my conversation with Claire Blur. And we'll get this up and running, she says, hopefully.
Given that we know sibling sexual abuse is the most underrated form of sexual abuse that occurs within a home, that actually is quite a scary number. So if it's as unreported as we think it is, then actually that number is huge. And that's why we can say that we think it is 3 times more likely that you'll be abused by a sibling than you would by a parent, because actually the level of underreporting, because, and I'm sure you're talking about this in all of the conversations, because I think parents are so nervous to report, because what does it mean for the fracture within the relationship of the family?
Yeah.
Professionals don't recognize it, as we found out from the other survey we did with 700 professionals. Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's so underreported. You know, people dismiss it, or they silence it, or they don't know how to respond to it. So they hope that it's just children being children. And so therefore, like, it's massively underreported. So to hear those numbers from the police when they're not even recording it properly, and they were really open to that. They're like, we're not even recording it all the time. We're like, wow, that is a huge amount in a very unreported, part of CSA.
So what she's referring to there is that in the research that was done, and I won't be precise in all of the numbers here, but a certain number of police forces in England and Wales were part of the research, and they were sharing over the course of a 2-year research project the number of incidents where a person reported sexual assault, sexual abuse. The victim was under the age of 18. 24% of those that were reported were those committed by a sibling. So 24%. And as she was just saying, you know, that is when the police put their hands up and said, we're not reporting this properly. We don't have boxes for siblings on these forms, you know, and all this, and that's evidenced in that research, just how prevalent sibling sexual abuse is. And if we know it's the most underreported, underfunded, under-researched area of sexual abuse, then we know there is a problem. So that's why we're here today. That's why this whole resource pack has been put together. The library of videos is to provide this information on the realities of sibling sexual abuse, some of the things that give rise to sibling sexual abuse, as well as some of the things that families can do to prevent it, signs they can watch for, and also if there is disclosure in your family, what you can do about it. And also, really one of the things that I wanted to bring forth in this event as well is that, you know, there are a number of myths and a lot of misinformation about sibling sexual abuse that cause parents to pause when it comes to what do I do next if I either have an inkling that one of my children is behaving inappropriately or I know it. You know, parents pause about, okay, what do I do next? Because of, as she was alluding to, Claire was alluding to, there's a fear of fracture in the family and all of these sorts of things. There's so much good treatment out there. And of course, as more and more people are talking about this subject, more treatment will come, that families don't fracture, right? It's possible that they can stay together. So one of the videos, after the introductory video, I go into a conversation with Kieran McCartan, Annette Tellman, and Stephen Barry about what is sibling sexual abuse, how is it different than other forms of child abuse, to try and get some clarification of things. One of the challenges, though, is that we've come up against, and I know you're very aware of this too, Gloria, is that there's no real definition for sibling sexual abuse. It's a little bit all over the place, simply because of the understudying and the under-researching, right? So it is a little all over the place. But in that particular video, which is the first one after my very quick introductory video, we go into that conversation more in depth. What are the challenges about the definition of sibling sexual abuse, and what the majority of academics and professionals right now would deem to be a quasi-appropriate definition. Right after that, though, the next video in the series, I meet with Brad Watts and Spencer Bailey, who are both experts in working with families who are affected by sibling sexual abuse. And they speak so clearly and so well about these myths and misinformation about sibling sexual abuse. You can't come out of that video with Spencer and Brad not having a deeper understanding and not, you know, not clarifying in your own mind some of the myths that you might have bought into about what sibling sexual abuse is. So that's a really good, I'm very happy with the way that video came out, because I know how important it is for parents and others to alleviate some of their concern about myths and misinformation.
Yep, I think so. And there is a lot of it out there. But what we know about parents is that once they understand a bit more and have some language to hang this on, this whole conceptual area on, they're then more likely to move closer towards. They're more likely towards move closer towards wanting further information, finding ways to support their children, and recognizing that for the older child who might be sexually abusing the younger child, it's more of a mental health issue, Nancy, than it actually is criminal behaviour. Although, as we know, we've talked about, one doesn't excuse the other. However, I think for parents who are watching or considering whether or not their children may be part of a group that are being sexually abused as siblings, that look, you're not alone, and there are many people out there who are looking at the same thing. So I think just understanding that for some of our beautiful young children and teenagers, they're just struggling with this as well, and there hasn't been an avenue or a place to take it. So this is what today is about as well. We're trying to launch something here so that the whole community globally can feel reassured that
One of the things that I didn't mean to cut you off, but one of the things that I noticed a lot when I was creating this event was the willingness between everyone, you know, professionals who are working with SSA families and other other professional families such as yourself in psychotherapy and all that, are really looking for ways to collaborate, looking for what is working in this country or this part of the world and what is not. How can we as a global community come together in understanding what we can do next. So the next 3 videos are very specifically 3 different areas of the world. So I had a conversation with Dale Tolliday and Russ Pratt in Australia, who are experts in this domain. And I found that conversation particularly interesting, and I want to talk with you about it. Given where we are, this conversation is in the Australasia zone predominantly. What I found really interesting is that the approach there emphasizes more, as you were sort of alluding to, the health aspect of sibling sexual abuse rather than the criminality of it. Knowing all these differences between sibling sexual abuse and other forms of child abuse, such as the depth of relationship between siblings, the brain development aspects of the person causing harm, the long-term impacts of things like attachment between family members, et cetera, et cetera. The predominant attitude or mindset is sibling sexual abuse is a health issue for the whole family.
Yes.
So
just on that, just because we've had a question from a caller, and I think it's from one of our wonderful audience watching, Susan Dunlop has asked, what do we call? What is there a name, Nancy? Can you answer about? So you might need to call out the question, please, so the audience.
I hope everybody can see it. Oh no, that's in chat. So what do you nowadays refer to as the abuser, the perpetrator as? Is there a new term, seeing you've mentioned them causing harm? So that's an extremely good question. And in a number of the videos in this event, there is a discussion, several discussions with the professionals, with everybody on the call. There is some problem areas with particularly the definition, but also the terms. So if you go to the second video, which is the one with Kieran and Stephen and Anat, we go into it in more depth. In professional circles, for those people working with children, they tend to use the terms the person who was harmed and the person causing the harm. In summary, one of the reasons why is that to label an 11 or 12 or 13-year-old who is causing the harm as an abuser is a label that is difficult to carry later into life for that person. However, ask anybody who is a survivor of sibling sexual abuse and they'll say, I was abused by a perpetrator. So it depends on who you are in that whole relationship. And that's one of the things that parents need to navigate. They've got one child, which Claire in another part of our conversations talks about as the double dilemma. You've got, as a parent, 2 kids. One is causing harm to another and another has been harmed. And the person who's been harmed wants to talk about being abused, but you as a parent do not want to call that other child an abuser. So there is that dilemma of language, but it is generally speaking something, particularly with the right and appropriate interventions and professional support, everybody can get their heads around. And people within the family can discuss it in a way that works for the family, everybody in the family, which is super important.
Yeah, and what I quite like about that, Nancy, and I think for the audience joining in, and what a great question again, Susan, is this. We've got to make it palatable, This has got to be a palatable kind of conversation globally. If as a parent or if as someone who knows of another family where there is a child causing harm, I love it because it softens it down enough that people can live with it within that whole family or extended family or arena. So we're not, again, it is not dismissing anything, but it is simply enabling a process to occur that wouldn't otherwise. If we're too black and white, if we're too blaming without understanding what drives any of it, then we risk the we take the risk of actually shutting things down completely. So
yes, and you know, the dance is always because the person who's been harmed will often say they've been abused. There's
yes.
a real dance there. It's like a slinky. If you remember slinkies, I'm dating myself.
Yes.
A slinky is
Are
trying
you
to
young
find
enough
balance.
to remember that?
But
Well,
the
I think that's another good point. So I just want to quickly address it.
Mhm.
We know that where there's adult to child, it is child sexual abuse. We know this.
Mhm.
And so we can't sugarcoat that. But I think what we're doing is we're looking at children. And when we're looking at children, we have to, as we would in any other arena or activity, we have to be mindful that these are children.
Mhm.
So this is where it all began, team, and this is the approach we need to start looking at. So back to you.
I think one of the other things that makes the conversation more palatable, that parents don't understand, and sort of going back to myths and misinformation, is that as an adult, we tend to look at the world in an adult lens. So anybody who is causing harm is an abuser, is a perpetrator, is a pedophile. When in actual fact, with sibling sexual abuse, statistics again and again show that even with intervention in particular, 90%, 96, 97% of those who have caused harm do not go on to cause harm again in future. Like, never say never, but you know, they don't. It's a different motivation. The person who is causing harm is differently motivated than a pedophile or a predator. So again, that brings up the debate about, do you label somebody as an abuser, or do you have the discussion about, okay, this person has caused harm? One thing I want parents to understand is that again and again in the research and in the professional practice, that person who is causing the harm is not a pedophile in waiting. And they are not really a quote unquote criminal. They might break the law pursuant to the judiciary in your region, but there is another motivation behind the behavior. And sometimes those motivations are because they themselves have been abused somewhere in their history by, say, an adult or somebody else. So they've learned the behavior. Don't even get me started on the conversation about children's access to pornography these days, but we do deal with that in video 4B. I believe we spend a lot of time discussing that. That children, you know, if you wait until your kids are 13, 14 years old to be talking to them about, you know, pornography and stuff, boy, they've already seen it probably for the last couple of years. And it's, you know, so we're not going to go down that path. But
there is another question, Nancy, or comment from Renee, who works in the space, and the comment is around labeling. And I guess, you know, I hate labels, because where there's a label, there's then a constriction, and the constriction, if you don't fit within that space, you are outside of it, and then where do you sit? So I guess labeling is unhelpful. People do need languaging and a context for what they're seeing in this space. And because this is so new in terms of being discussed, and Renee's saying again, yes, we need context. Of course we do. And that's partly why this is happening. And there is information around all of this. So would that be video 4B as well?
Video 4B, well, in quite a number of the videos we're talking about that. So the videos 4A, B, and C are different conversations around the world. So as I say, in 4A, I'm talking to Dale Tolliday and Russ Pratt. In 4B, I'm talking to people in the UK and India, and that's an extremely interesting conversation about the differences in how things are seen and what's being done. And 4C is more North and South America. And all of those videos tackle this conversation quite in depth, as does the one where I'm talking about what is sibling sexual abuse with Kieran and Nanette and Stephen. But all of these themes come out throughout the different videos. And there's common themes across the world. Another reason why I wanted an international event, so that everybody could understand this is an international concern. And also the solution is international. So, for example, we learned from Russ and Dale about the approach that is more health related than criminality. We learn from Nusrat Khan, who runs the Cactus Foundation in India. She and her organization have created relationships with stakeholders all over India. The stakeholders being children, parents, teachers, schools, corporates, government bodies, et cetera, et cetera. They've reached over 500,000 people in India to talk about child sexual abuse generally and the mental well-being of youth, but also now sibling sexual abuse. They have a program of child warriors, what they call child warriors, where children are talking to adults about the importance of the adults, the parents learning about child sexual abuse, sibling sexual abuse. In fact, Sahir wrote, she did a video for this project, and I've taken an excerpt of that video and put it in the resources pack. She's a 12-year-old that goes and teaches adults. Like this is this, and of course it's under supervision and training and all the rest of it. There's no question about that. But this is somebody who is really leading the charge, because we can learn so much from the kids. You know, we learn so much from the children. And, you know, if a group of 12-year-olds are happy to have this conversation, then I think the adults need to, you know, have the same conversations, and because we're the ones that they're creating the solutions.
Yeah. But we've just had another question through from Dragika, and she's saying, what if the one who has harmed the other sibling continues with other forms of abuse, for example, physical, emotional, even severe attacks towards the harmed sibling when it is adult sibling throughout the whole life?
I'm not sure I understand the question, unfortunately.
I think what the question is really referring to other forms of abuse. So it's not just sexual, it's physical, emotional.
Right. I mean,
yeah,
it's
and
very
carried on into adulthood. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's difficult to answer these sort of specific questions, but I think what we can do first off is both you and I would suggest that in that sort of situation, you do reach out to the professionals that are out there. I mean, there are professionals who thoroughly understand these situations, and it's a matter of reaching out. So one of the resources that's in the resources pack is SiblingsSexualTrauma.com. And it is a US-based website, but they have global, I've got a link to their global page. There are a wide breadth of resources there, of websites and links that would cover some of what is being mentioned there, that broader sense of wide scope abuse. And what do we do with this? And there's stopitnow.org. There's whatsokay.com or whatever it is, I can't remember, but it's in the resources pack and on that page. The point being is that there are many resources out there, because you know, and there will be more in the years to come, particularly now that this genie isn't going back in the bottle. We're going to continue to push this conversation. So therefore, you know, there's going to be more resources, and it is okay to reach out and ask for help. One of the things that, and I'm sure you know this as a ex-psychotherapist, people don't like to ask for help. Adults in particular are notoriously bad for not asking for help, right? So, but you kind of have to say, okay, I need some help. I don't understand this. The other thing I want to point people to in the resources pack is that I've included a 15-point checklist. It's really important, I think, that people, now that they have this resources pack, which is, I believe, quite comprehensive, not only in the videos, but the resources that are also included. Now that you have it, you need to do something with it. So that checklist provides people an opportunity to sort of work through, you know, this is currently what's going on in our household. And also, this is what I can learn. You know, if I'm not ticking off the box of the question that Nancy's asking, maybe I need to learn something. Maybe there's some place I need to go. And if there is, it's going to be in the resources pack. You're going to be able to figure out where you need to go to continue your learning. Because it's one thing to consume this information, or it's one thing to take it on board. You've got to do something with it. So my real hope for people who are who've not only gotten the resources pack, but who are attending these live events, is that they're going to take pieces of information, whether it's from the live event or the resources pack or the video or whatever, and actually do something with it. Ideally, what would be helpful is if people would keep the conversation going in their own families and in their own communities. So I encourage the parents, the adult survivors, the professionals, the academics, and other people who are listening now or who may see this video in future, I encourage you to find one thing and talk about it with somebody else. Because it's the only way we're ever going to get to a point where we're normalizing this conversation. If the conversation stays in your head, it's not a good place for it to be. If it stays around in your kitchen table, that's great. You're doing something with it within the family. But we know that society needs to normalize conversations in order for anything really to happen. So my real call to action for this Siblings 2-day event is take a piece of information, take one piece of information that you learn and do something with it. And find another piece of information that you'd like to learn more about and go find out more about it. There's no reason now, particularly with the resources that I've included in the resources pack, why people can't find answers to their questions. Maybe those answers will be online through, siblingsexualtrauma.com or stopitnow.org or What's Okay and some other websites. Or maybe the answers will be through seeking out professional support and advice. There's answers are out there to every question that any person involved in sibling sexual abuse may have.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because this is so newly outed, if that makes sense. Not a professional term, team, just a term, because it's so newly outed. Some of the conversation going on in the group chat, Nancy, is around, some of the professionals can't offer any resource or support or advice, or it's not a reluctance, but there's a lack of people who have been willing to step forward and provide resource and support. So it's very hard for people globally to find others who can help. So I know in the pack there will be referrals to specific groups or people across the world that you can easily access. But the great thing is, what I'm excited about is that you see this conversation growing. Now, another challenge to the people watching, and thank you to you wonderful people watching, is, here we are talking about it, a group of relative strangers, and yet we're all quite confidently talking about it. So take that and talk about it to one other person. That's another challenge from me to you today.
We like calls to action, Gloria. We do. I want to share one other little snippet that's sort of based on what we've been talking about. And this is from Jane Solovsky of the, it's like 2211 here at night, so I'm not going to get the name right. But I have a conversation about with her and Carrie Jenkins about problematic sexual behavior, cognitive behavior therapy, which is a form of treatment. And they are at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. And she made a really interesting comment that I just want to quickly share, and then we'll look to wrap up our conversation because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But it was a really interesting point about how we approach children and how that might not always be as helpful as we would like it to be. So that's not working. That doesn't help, does it? Here, I set the whole thing up and then it doesn't work. One second. Chat amongst yourselves.
Chat amongst yourselves. So let me fill a gap until you find. So I suppose one of the what we know to be true is that parents are the key to the solution and the prevention of this and in managing situations. If there is disclosure, honest and open communication is the key, along with being as non-judgmental and accepting of what the kids need to tell us. So you will go into shock. It would be unusual if you didn't. And that would be an expected, trauma response, frankly. But if all you do within that shock is to thank the child for disclosing and acknowledge that there will be some steps taken, and then shut the bedroom door and bang your head against the wall, that's fine. But the main thing is to not further re-traumatize a child by starting to ask 100 million questions, because that won't get you anywhere.
Or re-traumatize yourself by thinking it's all your fault and what a terrible parent you must be, that this situation was occurring in your home, under your nose, as it were, blah, blah, blah. And as we were saying right at the top of the call, sibling sexual abuse happens in every family dynamic. And you can have the quintessential 2.4 children, white picket fence. That's really old. I'm dating myself again. But that quintessential middle-class family, and still this is occurring. So it's not your quote unquote fault, but as you were saying, you can be part of the solution. And in actual fact, the solutions that come with the best outcomes are the one that involve the whole family. It's great if survivors and even those who cause harm find therapy themselves, particularly as adults. Absolutely, I totally agree with that. But really, the healing will come if the whole family is involved.
100%. And I know one of the things, Nancy, that you and I were talking about pre-show, and I'm again just filling the space while you look for your video.
It's not going to work.
It's not good. That's okay. So one of the things I think you and I were talking about pre-live was, the adult survivors among us. And you had some thoughts around that. We've got adult survivors walking around who, they're broken people, they're traumatized, they're holding on to a secret so tightly. The shame was never theirs to carry. And Nancy, forgive me, shame's big for me.
Yes,
shame
it is, yeah.
But the point is, we've got adult survivors out there. So I think when Nancy and I were talking earlier before go live, it was around, what is a way to manage it? And I think, Nancy, you had a wonderful response to that.
Remind me what the response was.
Remind you, and welcome, Holly Ann. I see you come through. I follow you on LinkedIn. So look, I think your response was, these people need to be treated gently. It's been a long time coming for them to be able to share their truth. And if as adults who are survivors of abuse, sexual abuse, sibling sexual abuse specifically, it will have taken an enormous amount for that to occur. I liken it to abseiling off a cliff without any abseil gear. So what we do in that situation is...
that's risky.
Well, thank you, says every sibling sexual abuse survivor everywhere.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, there's just an abundance of stories that people share without obviously breaching confidentiality or anonymity. But the stories, are pretty similar, because the trauma that's created for the person who was harmed and the person that did the harming, and then for the rest of the family. We might be talking about humans in Australia and India and UK and Canada and stuff like that, but they're all humans. So the feelings and the thoughts are very similar. The emotions are very similar. And the thing is now, particularly with an event like today's, and other things that have been happening, such as Jane Epstein's TEDx talk, which is Jane is part of this event as well. The People magazine article that's come out recently, the BBC documentary done in the UK. There's a documentary that's coming out in Belgium. You know, there's other things that are happening. The conversations are happening more. They're not happening enough. But those people who are either sort of working through this now within their family in one form or another, or those people who are just curious about this subject because they want to know more about it. Parents want to be more informed. There are people out there. There are people like you and me. I mean, I created this event, and I don't work with adult survivors, and I don't work with survivors professionally, but I provide some of the resources. You know, I've got my podcast and various other things, and I help people maneuver the system. There are people and groups and professionals and stuff out there, and parents and families and adult survivors do not need to go through this alone. One of the things I think you know is that at my SiblingsToo.com website, I collect anonymous stories from family members, survivors predominantly, but other family members as well, for the purposes of research. And I've been very humbled a few times to read stories that are from 50 or 60-year-old people saying, "You're the first person I'm telling ever." Now, you and I both know that that kind of existence is one where, you know, you're not being authentic in who you are. You're not able to tell your whole story in the world. There's part of you that you're hiding that impacts all the other parts of your life. And it's really important then that, you know, this event and other things that are going on help people to understand more and more about this subject and be able to act on it, much like we have now chosen as societies around the world to say enough is enough when it comes to sexual abuse in sports teams, in the Catholic Church or other churches, in the workplace. I mean, it's just because people finally said, no, we're not having this anymore. Yes, it goes on, but now there's a normalcy to the conversation. And that's what needs to happen. Then some of the concerns that people have, the confusion that they have, we can get that cleared up, and people can move forward with knowledge and not misinformation. They can move forward with confidence and not fear. You know, and that's what this whole day is about. And the whole resources pack and the videos and all the links and everything that are in it are specifically around that desired outcome, that people who get their hands on it will learn something and do something with it. And I like to think that it's been set up that way. Some conversations in particular that I would point out is the video regarding prevention and what to do if there is disclosure in your family, even if your child is an adult when they're disclosing. And even if that disclosure is by the person who caused the harm, that's an important disclosure for that person as well, and for the family. So that is in the video with the Tanith McCullochs, Stuart Allardyce, Jenny Coleman, and Georgia Naldret from Stop It Now. And then I have a great conversation with Nubia Duvall Wilson about the resources and what I was alluding to before. Okay, so you've come to this event and you've got the resources packed. Now what? What's next? That's a great conversation as well. So, and there's other conversations and videos in the whole library that is included in this first Siblings 2-day event.
So I think just as we're wrapping it up, Nancy, I think it's really important for people to realise, you know, you are not alone. You have not created this. There was nothing you did in your parenting to suggest that this would happen. This is something that does happen, and we're just here today to take the lid off, gently stand beside you, and provide resource and support through the wonderful resources that Nancy has worked tirelessly on for the last several months.
Thank you very much for that, Gloria. And so Holly-Ann, you've asked, how can we share this resources kit? I'm not sure what you mean by that. There are ways that you can share it with colleagues or whatever, for sure. And you have the link to all the videos in the resources pack. That's a widely available link. If you want to share those links with other people, they can go and watch the videos as well. That's not a problem. That's how it's set up, and all the resources as well. So that's perfectly okay for you to do. And You know, I know we've gone a little bit over time here, but I think the conversation, sharing it on LinkedIn might be a challenge. I don't know. You cannot share the resources pack itself on LinkedIn. But obviously the YouTube links can be shared wherever they're allowed to be shared, but the resources can't be.
Yeah, Holly-Ann, just message me on LinkedIn and I'll see what I can do to provide aspects of it. I don't think we can provide the whole thing.
No, you can't. You wouldn't be able to provide the whole thing on LinkedIn. But any of the links within it, you can certainly share those. So Gloria, thank you so much for joining me today. A little shout out to the sponsors. You'll see a window has been opened up the whole time that we've been on the call. These individuals and organizations have been very helpful to, you know, fund part of this event. It is very much a grassroots event, and it's just through the collaboration and the connection of people internationally, both the speakers, the sponsors, people who donated, and you know, all the people who provided support, the volunteers, the people who shared this on social media. All of these people made this event possible. So a special shout out from me to you, Gloria, and to all the other ones who so generously gave of your time, expertise and understanding, and your willingness to share your experiences. As you know, doing that can certainly help other people, but you know, I also know that it is a give on your part, and I appreciate that. So anybody can have the resources pack if they simply go to the page siblingstoo.com/events. You'll get yourself registered and it will come to you automatically, even a week from now, if that window will be open for quite some time. We're going to wrap up, and if there's any questions, I don't see any questions. I see chat going on, but I haven't had a chance to, that email address will be, just a minute. Yeah, SiblingsToo, Nancy at SiblingsTooProject.com. Email me there, or SiblingsTooMailbox@gmail.com. That works as well, or just directly from the website itself on SiblingsToo.com. You'll see in the background there. She's one of our sponsors. She has been so graciously behind the scenes running some of the tech tonight, except for the little mix up with the snippets on my machine. Had nothing to do with that. So the mix ups on my machine. So thank you, for your help with that too. I appreciate what you're doing behind the scenes. Gloria, anything else as we wrap up and say goodnight? Good morning,
yeah, look,
good afternoon.
Yeah, just everybody watching, whether you're a sibling, whether you're a parent, or whether you're a survivor yourself, you hold a unique space in all of this, and we stand beside you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Gloria. Thank you, everybody in the audience who are listening now and in future, as this particular video is being recorded and will also be available. So you and I will live on into infinity, Gloria.
Sorry about that, guys.
And if you do want to, you know, there's 2 other calls, and I know the time is awkward. I don't know where Maria, who's on the call, she's in Eastern time, so I expect to see you on all the other calls too, Maria. So but it's perfectly okay if people want to attend another call, and it'll be in the email that you would have received from me earlier today with, there you go, Maria, of course. It'll be in the email that you received from me, new webinar links and times and everything, and it'd be a pleasure to have you on those calls as well. Gloria, have you got anything else before we go?
No, I kind of think we've done it. And of course, the main thing of course, was to do exactly what you'd wanted, Nancy, which is to start normalizing these conversations.
Yep.
They can't stay in the deep, dark, traumatic pond if we're bringing them out of the shadows into the light. And we know that light always overcomes darkness. So thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Breaking the silence and stigma of sibling sexual abuse is the only way forward. So that's what we're doing. I thank you all. Take care, everyone. Good night. Good morning.
Bye.
Good afternoon.